Hi, I'm Ann Tracy, and I'm here talking to Pam Lehman in Parle County. Hello, Pam. Thanks for talking to Landon on Broadband.
Thanks for asking me.
Yeah, Pam, I'm just going to throw it out there. You are instrumental in broadband being as good as it is in Parle County. Do you want to tell the story? I'll give you an opportunity.
I have to tell the story.
Just abbreviated.
Well, so Parle County didn't really have any broadband coverage to speak of. And I was fortunate enough to be the executive director of the County Economic Development Authority when the opportunity came about through the ARRA program for us to deploy some broadband. And I guess I can admit that, I was motivated by a lot of reasons, but most especially because where I live, where I'm sitting today, at that time, I could barely get dial-up. And so having internet connections at home was impossible, and came to find out that there was an opportunity to partner with Farmers Mutual Telephone and submit a partnered application with Parle County and Farmers Mutual Telephone to the stimulus program to spread fiber optic broadband throughout the county. And we were successful. We did all the work and we really wanted it, but we also knew that there was no guarantee of funding. And so we were pretty blessed to have great support at the local, the state, and the federal level. And in the midst of that, got in connection with some other organizations in Washington, D.C., which at the same time as getting our stimulus funding, we launched a mobile computer lab to help people when they got the broadband so they knew how to use it. And as of just recently, that was 10 years ago.
Yeah.
And that little cheap bus we bought and fixed up, she's still on the road, and Mary's still out meeting with folks 3 days a week in Parle County, and very, very successful. She's successful because she did get a philanthropic donation from one of her users who passed away and left her money. So
wow.
I believe the funding is going to keep going through the end of this year, but I'm not sure if there's funding for next year. But we thought 3 years of that program would be wonderful, so 10 is phenomenal.
It's amazing. The computer commuter.
Yeah, the Parle computer commuter.
That's amazing. That's amazing. And you guys have had really fiber to the home for about 10 years. Even 12?
I would guess it's getting really close. Yeah, it's getting really close to that, because the funding all came through at the same time. It took, I suppose, in that whole process, probably 1.5 to 2 years before the full deployment, was done. But they were hooking people up just as soon as they signed up. And so, yeah, now we take it for granted.
That's good. That's good. That's a good place to be.
It is. It's a very good place to be.
It's a very good, and that kind of leads into the purpose that I've been talking to different counties all around Minnesota, and that is, how has broadband helped or hindered the preparation in dealing with COVID?
Well, I feel very blessed. I have my own business now, and I work from home. And 95% of what I do all the time is from home, and having that broadband connection is absolutely critical. And one of the things I do is working with the Small Business Administration through the Small Business Development Centers in Southwest Minnesota. And so once the COVID hit and all the federal programs started coming out, we were busier than ever. And if I had not been able to access all the information that I needed, being limited of how much travel we could do and how much contact we could have, it was vital. We were working many, many extra hours a week, and I can't imagine how many more that would have been with a poor broadband connection.
Now, most of the businesses that you work with, are they, how is broadband helping them? Do they all have fiber pretty much? Are they?
In this region, I think the majority of them, over the last 10 years, have chosen to take that route. there was a lot of skepticism, when it first came about this was too good to be true, but most everybody did at least get the fiber to the premise, whether or not they hooked up to it. And I believe that, once this pandemic hit, I think it was very quickly obvious that some of those businesses realized they needed to make a switch. And I think that same could be said for families that maybe had been feeling that, for whatever reason, they could just stick with what they had. But once you get 2-3 kids at home, working on devices and people working from home, I think many of them, in fact, I just saw something on Facebook a day or two ago, somebody talking about their kids couldn't Zoom into class or it kept, losing connection. My situation recently changed, and my daughter's living here and my 2 grandkids are living here, and she works from home. I work from home. Those kids are learning from home. And, so that's 2 computers, 2 Chromebooks, 4 or 5, smartphones, and we're all drawing on broadband all day, every day. I mean, and things just run seamlessly. I can't imagine not having, that level of access. So when I do travel, when I do get out and about, and now that's less than before, but even before, you'd often get to places much better populated than Parle County, and get into a hotel room and be just totally frustrated with the broadband connection because, once you've driven a Ferrari, it's tough to go back to driving a Pinto.
Yeah.
and you very quickly realize how wonderful that is and how much it streamlines the work that you do, how much it streamlines the things you do on a personal level, or how it streamlines your communication with your friends and family you can't see because of the pandemic.
Yeah, I imagine. Now, do you know what the situation is with most of the students in Parle County? Are obviously all online in the spring.
Yeah, all online in the spring. This fall, they all went back and went in person. Then due to a construction project, the high school was flooded. So a little more than a week ago, all the high school kids had to start doing distance learning. So that brought one of my grandkids home. And then over the weekend, the elementary student got notified that they had classmates that, had tested positive for COVID. So now she's home for at least 2 weeks doing distance learning. So I guess you would call what they're doing now a hybrid version, but not all because of COVID. Some of it is, construction related.
And sorry, I'm writing as we talk. Are there any students that you know of that have had trouble? I know you're not.
Yeah, I have heard of some students really struggling, and parents struggling with, how do we get enough broadband if we're trying to work and they're trying to, go to school, and there's so much of it that's streaming, because they're not sending any paper, anything home with these kids. So everything is digital. And so I have heard of some instances where, while the kids are Zooming with school and the parents trying to work, somebody's losing a connection, and it's very, very frustrating. Of course, they always get the same answer from me if they're in Parle County. It's like, then I'd call Farmers. I'd get hooked up because you're going to see, a drastic improvement. And now with the service that we have, you can stream your television. You don't need cable. You can stream your TV. You can get your internet. If you want a landline phone, you can get it all from them. So, God, I kind of sound like an advertisement for Farmers Mutual.
So we'll clip that one out and send it to them.
Yeah, partial, and always very, very appreciative of the service that they provide, from the actual technology to the fact that, wow, they're local. If you do have an issue or a question, you're talking to someone in another really small town, either within the county or just a short distance away, and they are very good about customer service and reacting quickly, because I think that's as important as anything. I mean, no technology is perfect, but having that cooperative that is locally owned And it really does feel like they care about their customers, because the reaction time is astounding. I mean, they react very, very quickly because nothing is perfect.
Nice, nice. Well, that's always good to hear. Always good to hear.
It is.
Now, if we could just get them to other counties, that'd be, I mean, I know they do serve some, but yeah, expand that.
Yeah.
So what do you know about healthcare in the area? Are they doing anything special?
I know the healthcare facilities. My husband and my son both work in a healthcare facility, and I do some healthcare recruitment. My husband's in maintenance, so he has to be there all the time. But they have, really advanced their technology, making as many things as possible as remote as can be. My son works in the billing department, and through the pandemic, the difficult part of the pandemic, I guess, he did work from home. He too lives nearby and has, Farmers Mutual telephone, and him and his roommate both, were working from home. So that was really critical for them, to be able to do that. From the healthcare perspective, as far as recruitment is concerned, whether those are allied staff members or providers, the facilities are very concerned, about having people out and coming in contact not only with their staff and their patients, but the providers as well. So there's been a lot of creativity, I guess would be what I would call it, in how they're interviewing. I think from a small town perspective, it's a little more difficult for them, because having that on-site relationship is really important. So not being able to bring them on-site for a site visit makes that hiring decision tougher, right? If you have a doctor coming from Kentucky, and he can only see the facility online, and you can only meet the candidate online. This is wonderful to talk with you via Skype, and you and I know one another fairly well. So yeah. I feel like this is a good conversation, but I would think it's got to be a lot more difficult when it's two strangers, trying to communicate the needs of the facility and how is this candidate going to be a good fit for us. So there's been a lot of Skype, Zoom, type interviews that have been going on. And actually I have quite a few of them that even are going so far as to doing 2 or 3 versus a single phone interview followed by a site visit. They're doing 2 or 3 digital, and they're really at the point where the candidate is feeling, yep, I'm going to take this position, and the facility is feeling, yep, this is the candidate we want, before they put them on a plane and risk their exposure and their health and the well-being of their family, as well as the health and the well-being of their staff and the patients in the facility. So it's a much longer process in healthcare right now. I know that they have been upping their work with, telemedicine as much as possible. I think that's maybe been kind of a bonus, because a lot of the facilities have really been pushing over the last more than a decade, trying to push insurance companies to approve some higher reimbursements, for telemedicine. And I think this kind of forced their hand. And I don't know that they're going to be able to go back and say, well, now after the pandemic, we don't have to pay that much. And I think once they see how many more patients they can see, and if the outcomes are as good as what we're hearing they are, it only makes sense. It really does only make sense to save that if you can.
I always think I wish they had it when my kids were little, because once you've seen pink eye, you've seen pink eye.
Yes, absolutely. Or chicken pox or something like that, right? It's a pretty obvious kind of ailment that, really could have and should have. I think productivity too. I think those that are monitoring productivity, and I haven't heard this exactly from just specifically healthcare, but I have heard from other businesses that tracking their staff working from home, they've seen increased productivity in almost all positions. And I know working from home is not right for everybody, and some people need to be focused on work by going to another space. But those of us who are hardwired to work from home, we actually are much more productive at home and without the interactions and without the interruptions. And not that we don't like people, but you can focus, and you can just concentrate on getting everything done and not worrying about the driving conditions or the office drama or whatever things there might be.
I think sometimes it's that we like people too much. So
Yeah.
that, I mean, it's been a long time since I've worked in an office, and the only time I miss it is when I'm at home and I don't feel like working. I think, wonder what's happening at the water cooler.
Yeah, so there's a lot of that walk by and hi Susie, and then pretty soon that turns into a conversation. And not that those relationships and those conversations maybe aren't important, but it really can be a detriment, to the overall productivity, in the long run. Good for morale, maybe, but not so much for productivity. So I think we could maybe see some changes in the needs of businesses, maybe that we're thinking, oh gosh, we've gotten so many staff, we're going to have to add on. Maybe it's a matter of talking to your staff and saying, who wants to work from home? I did just talk to a recruiter from a major healthcare system this morning, and she said that at their facility, they sometimes have these spaces called, I think she called them drop-off zones. And so if they needed to come to the office, instead of having a full office, they just had somewhere that they dropped their purse, their coat, their laptop, and went and did their business in the facility that needed to be done, met with who they needed to meet with, and didn't have a full office. They just had a location that they signed out for the day. And, if they needed to, there was a desk and a chair and a phone and things they could sit down and be productive in the facility, but it wasn't their full-time location.
Nice.
So I think we could see some of those hybrid things coming too for business.
Yeah, is that something that they have since COVID, or have they always had something like that?
No, she said they've always had that. Yeah, they've always had that, probably in the last 5 years or so. That's the first I'd heard of it, and that was just this morning.
Nice. You talk to a lot of business owners. Have the business owners been surprised at this productivity? Or have you won some people over to the broadband side?
Deal with are maybe small enough that the impacts aren't maybe quite as apparent to them. But I do think a lot of them really took advantage of the broadband and being able to promote, ongoing communication with their customers, scheduling, sales, at the door sales versus having them come into the store. If they needed repairs or something like that done, scheduling pickups or drop-offs. And doing a lot of that, by email, by phone, by Facebook, Messenger, using Messenger and things like that. So I think a lot of them, got pretty creative in their marketing efforts when they were forced to be closed and not let customers in the store. If you're a sole proprietor owner, you really can't shut the doors. And if people are calling and asking for your product, if you can get into your facility and create the product or select the product and, complete that transaction without person-to-person contact or with very nominal, person-to-person contact, it probably was what kept some of those businesses open during that really uncertain and scary time.
Yeah.
And without a good connection, that's not going to happen.
Well, and without a good connection, both on the business end and on the customer end.
Yes. Yep.
I'm thinking I've asked you about schools and I've asked you about businesses. Local government. How's the county doing? Do you know?
I have to admit, I really don't know.
Okay. No.
I do that county offices were closed for a time, whether they had staff that were working in the locked facility, just not letting people in or not. I'm sorry, I really don't know. I'm totally disconnected from the government part of things right now.
You can't know everything.
Government's government. They do their thing, and they've got to function, right? Because whether we like it or not, there's a lot of things the government does that we don't see, and there's a lot of things that have to be happening to prepare for things that are maybe long range upcoming. During the pandemic would have been when they'd have been working really hard getting voting equipment ready and stuff like that, even though it was, many, many, many months away. So I know there were things and people that had to be there, and I'm sure they, took whatever time they needed to do that safely. But I can't answer the question about how they were impacted by broadband.
Yeah. Yeah. Now you've talked about doing some of the recruitment. How, when it comes to not just the jobs, but when it comes to getting the people to move, are you seeing greater interest? Are people asking right straight up about if there's broadband? How much do you push the fact that it's so good?
Well, I recruit for 40 hospitals, 35 hospitals in outstate Minnesota. So they're kind of located all over. But a trend I've seen over the last 5 years, we try to find out from the candidate, not only what would make them happy, and sometimes a broadband connection is very important for them, but we also try to find out, what about the rest of the people relocating with them? Do they have a significant other? Do they have children? Do they have other people that are relocating with them, and what are their needs? So if they have children that they homeschool, we're finding that broadband connection is definitely discussed. But what has kind of really popped out in the last 2 years is, when we start talking about, your significant other, what kind of employment do they need, and making sure we can have a potential for finding a job for them as well. I'm hearing more and more, my significant other has a position and they telecommute, they can work from anywhere. They're being flexible and they're willing to live where I get my dream job. And so being able to say, this part of the state of Minnesota has this level of broadband, here has this, I think it's definitely something that they consider. And I think it's something they definitely look at when they are looking to come to a new location. They also notice if there's parts of the state that really don't have a great online presence. They very quickly notice, I can't find much out about that community. And so then we share that with the community, with the facility, and say, can you partner together and get a better digital presence? Because this does impact, recruitment of not only physicians, but really any healthcare worker, because we don't know what the rest of the people in their lives need.
Right. And certainly anyone under a certain age, where that age maybe once was, college age, it's really certainly under the age of 50, I'd say, that's how we get our information.
It is. I guess, it's kind of scary to admit, but I don't listen to the radio, and I don't buy the local newspaper. I get all of my news basically online. Yeah. I don't know if that's good or, maybe I'm just ignorant. but
blissfully,
but the old ways of communicating are not the same, and being able to have that, if you're used to being able to read the New York Times on your computer rather than waiting 2 days in Minnesota to get, the New York Times from 2 days ago.
Yeah.
Why wouldn't you? And if you can't get that online, you can get it where you're at and you're an avid newspaper reader, that could be a deal breaker.
Right. Right. Well, yeah, if you can't pull up a newspaper, and you're right. I mean, I listen to the radio when I'm in the car. Turns out I'm not in the car as much as I used to be.
No, I'm not either. And when I'm in the car, and this is part of technology too, I listen to satellite radio because I don't want to hear the bad news. I want to drive and not be distracted by, all the chaos in the world. So very seldom in the car that I listen to a standard radio station.
Nice, nice. I'm trying to think if I've covered all. I think I've covered kind of all of the usual bases, but anything else that you've just seen or heard? Any big grumbles to share or any great innovations?
Well, I don't have any grumbles. There's always people with grumbles, I guess, but I think it's pretty imperative. And, my hope is that the state and the federal governments will start to realize that, the backbone of broadband, it's as important today, or in some cases equally important to electricity and water. It's an infrastructure piece that they just can't keep ignoring. And there needs to be realistic minimums. So 10 years ago, I remember hearing from Frontier that, what you've got, what more do you think you need? Why do you think you need such fast speeds? And here we are 10 years later, and I cringe to think about, where would things be here if we didn't have the level that we have? And we're rural, but we have a lot of people that provide a lot of services at a very reasonable cost to the rest of the world. So whether it's rural or metropolitan or suburban, having that level playing field everywhere, to me, should happen. I don't know that there's many places in this country anymore where you can't get electricity. So it should really be that way for high-speed broadband. If I were going to beat the drum, I'd say let's just do fiber everywhere and just get it over and get it done right. But I realize financially that's maybe not, the answer all the time.
It's a good basis.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Pam, thank you so much for
You're
joining
welcome.
us. Yeah. Yeah. And thanks for getting fiber in Parle County. As I said, I know you were instrumental, so it's tough to imagine the place without it. Yeah.
It's a fun thing to talk about, and it's probably always going to have a soft spot for me. So I'm always going to beat the broadband drum.
Good. Thank you.